Welcome to the Katie Halper Show, which it's probably the one of the most consistently technically challenge shows that you can watch on a consistent basis. So you're welcome, everyone. You're welcome. Very excited to have so many people here. Very excited to have with me my co-pilot for this evening is the wonderful Kate Willett. Kate Willett is a stand-up comedian. She is the co-host of the Reply Guys podcast. She's also the author of Dirtbag Anthropology, which is an Audible original. She's been on the Late Show with Colbert. She's been on Netflix. She's been on Comedy Central. And we're going to be joined shortly by the inimitable James Zogby, who's the founder of the Arab American Institute. And we'll tell you more about him. But he's always such a pleasure to have on, just a fountain of knowledge and insight. And he'll be talking to us about Israel, Palestine. Also, we're going to be joined by Leslie Lee. He's going to talk to me and Kate about Joe Rogan and pop culture, but also we're doing an exciting thing. So anyone out here who has an iPhone, download this app called Callin. It's Callin, like Callin, and it's a cool app where you get to listen in on conversations. It's kind of like the radio show, but it's on iPhone, and you'll be able to ask me questions, and we'll be able to talk about different things. And it's going to be a continuation of what I'm talking about with Kate and Leslie. And we're going to keep our conversation going, take some of your questions. And that'll be at 8 o'clock. So right after this. So again, that's Callin. The app is Callin. Download it on your iPhone. It's free. And you can also watch it in the browser. If you don't have an iPhone, you can watch in the browser. But if you want to ask questions, you may get called on this app called Callin. So very excited. Also want to remind everyone that, of course, we made it to 1,000 Patrons. I'm so excited. We made it to 1,000
awesome.
Patrons.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very excited. Keep the Patrons coming. We really appreciate your support. We couldn't build the show without you. It's really true. As corny as it sounds, it's corny because it's true. Sometimes corniness is true. Sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason, right?
Yeah. I like your books, by the way. They look great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. This is a different setup that I'm in. I'm in my urban setup, my urban abode. And yeah, I think what about you, Kate? How are you doing? I'm sorry, I'm still a little flustered because I feel like I've messed with the space-time continuum or something at the beginning of the show.
Oh, I'm doing good. I've just been kind of having a chill couple months with sort of chilling out, riding out the surge, doing some shows here and there, but mostly pretty low key,
Yeah.
Enjoying my winter. I've been getting into do you know who Wim Hof is?
Yeah, the breathing guy.
The breathing guy who's into cold showers. I've been knocking myself out by taking cold showers, getting, as they say, high on my own supply, as Wim Hof is fond of saying. And this is I think I'm going to become one of these weird cold shower wackos. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
I did one of those the other day. We should definitely talk about this after we talk to Jim Zogby, and we'll bring in Leslie for this chat. Remind me to talk about this, about showering stuff, because there's a lot to talk about there. A lot. Also want to remind people that they can become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And you can become YouTube members. And if you do that, you get these really cool emojis and badges and like Bodhi emojis and badges that tell you how long you've been a member for. And guys, everyone, I don't know how many likes we have right now, but I can't see the comments. This is weird. That's why I thought that we weren't having a live thing, because I don't see the comments. Are there comments in the regular show? There are comments, right? Yeah, there are comments. I'm sorry. This is going to be weird because I have to have YouTube open to see the comments. So Brad, I guess you can tell me about the super chats. Hello, Katie from Brian Frederick. I really appreciate that. No idea what happened in Patreon, in my StreamYard. But anyway, it's great to see you guys here. And let's just I think we're going to bring in, with that seamless intro, we're going to bring in our first excellent guest. He is the founder of the Arab American Institute. He's the managing director of the Zogby Research. And he has a great piece that is in The Nation, and it's called Biden's Pledges to Palestinians, a Year of Disappointment. So without any further ado, Professor, I mean, Dr. James Zogby. Are you a professor too?
I was for many years, but I found that while I loved my own kids, I really hated kids I was teaching. So
wow, that's so honest. That bold honesty that you
I'm
can't
sorry,
find most
but,
places.
yeah.
No, it's good. That's great. All right,
Yeah,
good to know. I mean, it could have been worse. If it had been the reverse, that would have been really bad for your kids.
That would have been horrible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
I
nice
also
to
wasn't a big fan of a lot of my colleagues, to be really honest about it. I mean, it didn't matter what university or college you were at; it was the center of the universe. And
Right.
the you know, when the bar gets set really low, the internal faculty squabbles and the interdepartmental squabbles, it was just numbing. And so, you know, to get myself out of it, I started the Palestine Human Rights Campaign. That wasn't the reason I started it, but you know, I did start it, and after about a year and a half, you know, my wife and I just decided we were going to pack it up and move to Washington and try to make a go of it full time. And so
where were you at the time?
Leave of absence. It was a sabbatical year. I did that, took a leave of absence, and never went back. But yeah, I really didn't enjoy college. At the time, I was at this godforsaken place in South Central Pennsylvania, Shippensburg, which if I had been Margaret Mead, and you know, I would have found it interesting, but it was, you know, I've always lived in a city. I'd always lived in an immigrant environment where there was a global worldview and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this place that's like, and it was hard, you know, I wasn't ready for it. There were no Black people in the whole community. There were no ethnics. I mean, I had a senior class of 36 kids. 8 of them were named Miller, and none of them related to each other. And you know, there were no Italians or Irish or Polish or Hispanics or, you know, and it was hard. Anyway, why am I doing this now?
No,
so
just because the personal is political.
I'll get off the couch right now and stop telling you my life story. But
no,
thanks for having me, because I do want to talk about these issues that you're raising tonight.
Of course. And also, I want to let people know that Jim Zogby has a great coffee column. What is it called? It's called
It's called Coffee and Column with Jim. It's just every Wednesday we talk about the column I write on Monday.
And so this week you're going to be talking more about
this amnesty report, and
right,
and about the murder of Omar Abdulmajid Assad, who was killed in the West Bank in January 12th by Israeli soldiers. Yes. That's the 78-year-old man.
Yeah, who we talked about on this show, and probably only made the news because was a Palestinian American.
Right.
So that's okay, great. Definitely. And people, if they want to join that listserv so they can watch it, how do they do that?
Write to me at jzogby at aaiusa.org. jzogby at aaiusa.org. Or great. Yeah, now I see you got my Twitter address up. Sure.
Yeah. And that everyone make sure you follow Jim also. So let's talk about your latest piece, which is about the Biden administration's kind of takes a look at a year of his disappointment when it comes to the treatment of Palestinians. So how would you actually go through in your piece a number of promises that he made, and then you say that he's only kept one of those promises? Could you go over some of those promises?
Yeah, look, let me start with the fact that I've been negotiating since the Jackson campaign, when I was deputy campaign manager in the 80s, with the party establishment on the platform all these many decades. I remember back in 88, we wanted to include just the mild language, legitimate rights of the Palestinians, which was Camp David language. They told me, if you put the P word in the platform, all hell will break loose. And so it never happened. We had a debate, and it was the first time it had ever been spoken about at a convention. Flash forward up to 2016 with Bernie, we tried to get settlements in, and they wouldn't put the word in. Tried to get the word occupation, they wouldn't put the word in. Tried to get a whole bunch of things, they wouldn't do it. And it bothered me because Obama had talked about the occupation. He talked about settlements, but they were afraid to do it. So this year, I was negotiating with them again, and the word settlement got in. They said, we're opposed to settlement. Oh, ooh, that's big, right? They wouldn't put the word occupation in, which is kind of weird that they wouldn't put it in. But they did. I said, there has to be some language about equality, about the human rights, whatever. And they came up with this formula, which they now use almost every time, about the equal worth of Palestinians and Israelis, which I thought was, it's a nice place to go. They also talked about undoing some of the damage of Trump, which is opening the consulate in Jerusalem, the consulate for Palestinians in Jerusalem, which Trump closed, and reopening the Palestinian office in Washington, which also Trump closed. And none of that's happened. And even they gave aid. They did give aid. Actually less than than Obama had given it. It's a step down. But when we talk to them, they say, well, we really can't criticize them. I know that we said we oppose settlements, but we can't criticize them because the government's too fragile. And it's this mindset of the doing everything to protect internal Israeli democracy, not realizing what it does to the Palestinian side, who become sort of chopped liver in the equation. It's like they become a throwaway people. Yeah, it's terrible what's happening to them, but we got to make sure that Netanyahu doesn't get back in office. That becomes the low bar, right? Anything to keep Netanyahu from office, they'll do it. And at the same time, when we fought with them to put in some language about conditioning aid, if you say you oppose this, you oppose that, you want two states, you value the equal worth of both. And if Israel does stuff that makes all of that impossible, right? They keep building settlements, they make a two-state solution impossible, they treat Palestinians with total disregard for their rights, but you won't condition any support for that. The result is that Israel's never going to change. It's like a spoiled kid. I mean, if you keep saying, if you do that, you're going to get punished, and you never get punished, why change? So the result is that by being too, I guess cowardly might be the word in terms of domestic politics here, to condition aid and say to Israel, if you do this, we're going to take measures that are going to make it difficult for you to continue to operate this way. And if you at the same time say, well, we can't do this because we have to be really careful not to get Netanyahu back in office, basically what that says is that Palestinian lives aren't equal. They don't have worth. And you don't basically give a damn what happens to them. And that's kind of what the gist of the article was that Palestinians have every reason to be disappointed because none of the promises Biden made got delivered on.
Right. And, one of the interesting things that we've seen lately, and you've talked about this a lot, is the kind of shift in public opinion about Israel-Palestine. But that hasn't necessarily translated into any kind of changes on the ground, right? Or any changes on a policy level?
But it has made change. It has made changes in the political discourse here, right? I mean, that the fact that we're having this conversation, that you're having this conversation as frequently as you do, right? And that you have people who listen and follow it. I mean, look, when I started the Palestine Human Rights Campaign, it was a hard row to hoe, right? I mean, death threats were constant. We did succeed in bringing on board all of Martin Luther King's, all of the people who'd been around him, everybody except Andy Young. We did get a lot of folks from the churches and peace groups, but we couldn't penetrate down to students, to younger people. The media culture did not allow for a broad projection of the message. That's all changed, and it's because of a change in the culture in the country. I mean, people have access to more information. People are seeing this play out in ways, like who knew what the Uyghurs were, or the Rohingya, or the Tutus, and I mean, tribes in Africa that were dying in Darfur we didn't know what that. Now everyone knows, and at least enough young people moved by what they're seeing mobilize around these issues, and Palestine is one of them, that we actually have traction and can have a debate. I mean, I took human rights cases before we started the human rights campaign. I went to Amnesty and I said, I've got these prisoners who have been detained without charge, and I've got these other 2 cases of people who were tortured. Could you adopt the case like they do with other cases? And people wrote letters and all that. And they told me, Amnesty US said, please don't do that. We don't touch those cases here in America. It's too controversial for us. Well,
they were Palestine cases?
Yeah. Flash forward today, Amnesty issues a report on apartheid. I mean, that's the change that's taken place. Human Rights Watch was no profile in courage on this issue in the beginning. Look at where they are today. And while I know that there are people on the Palestinian left, so to speak, who want to denounce J Street and whatever, I mean, J Street is open space in the Jewish community and in Congress for a debate. If not now, bend the arc. Breaking the silence, Jewish Voice for Peace. There's a huge movement underway that is changing the political discourse, and it has not yet cracked the surface where the administration is going to say, "Oh my God, we really got to be careful about how we deal with this issue because we'll be in big trouble." No, but we do have lots of members of Congress who are speaking out today in ways that never before. And I believe that the momentum is growing. I said with regard in an interview I did recently on the amnesty report that can we switch gears to that for a second?
Yeah, of course. Yes, please tell us about that amnesty report.
And classic, the way that Hespera works, right, is that they had already prepared their talking points before the report came out. Nobody read it, but they read the talking points, right? And almost as if on cue, boom, embassy says something, members of Congress come out, all the American Jewish organizations, it's dishonest. It doesn't tell the truth.
So before you talk about the response, can you set up what Amnesty said?
Oh, Amnesty said that Israel was guilty of the war crime of apartheid, because the legal definition of apartheid is that you have a system of laws and practices that that favor one community at the expense of another. It's just that simple. And they, in 280 pages, this is not like a cavalier statement, just throwing it out. They have 280 pages of documented cases where, from land to housing to healthcare benefits to social services in Israel proper, to theft of land and settlement expansion, et cetera, in the West Bank, to the criminal justice system. I mean, they go through the whole range of behaviors that are designed to protect the Jewish population and make the Palestinian population pay the price by keeping them as a subdued or repressed minority, who will, as one early minister in one of the first Israeli governments said, to make them bearers of water and hewers of wood. They've become the sort of the low paid workers in Israel and on the settlements. That comes out, and without reading it, these guys, it's not true, it's dishonest. And it's how can they say it's apartheid? It's anti-Semitic to say it's apartheid. Which is a new definition of anti-Semitism here.
Right.
But when the granddaddy of human rights organizations says this, that's got traction. That's a big deal.
Right.
And I think that I think that, as I said in my comment, I said they tried with this blitz of public statements to nip it in the bud, but it's too late.
Yeah.
Because the bud already has roots and it's growing, and all they can do is try to figure out how to defame it or demonize the people who issued it, hoping that will silence, but it's not going to do it. It's too much already, and I think that it's a matter of time. I mean, way too many people are going to suffer, but a lot has changed, and I think that the Israeli public is going to grow weary of being on this, trying to defend the indefensible. I know a lot of American Jews are, and the organizations put up a brave front, but basically they're full of crap. I mean, they don't have a case to make, so they make it with bullying, and they make it with threats, but that's not winning over people at this point.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to show people this Twitter interaction you had. So you tweeted to Avi Mayer, and just let me go back and explain what happened. So Avi Mayer tweeted, if I had a dime, and Avi Mayer is with the American Jewish Council,
Committee.
Which how would you committee? Sorry,
the
American Jewish Committee. And they are, how would you describe them?
It's an organization that, it was founded to advance and empower American Jews, etc. But it's now become, in too many ways, as he says here in his bio, he was a spokesman for the IDF. I mean, I kind of find it interesting right there. He served on the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, was a spokesperson for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and now he's running the office of the American Jewish. I kind of like it. Blah, blah, blah. I'm lost here in the middle of all this. But yeah, I mean, defending Israel is not the same as defending the American Jewish community, and they got to figure that out at some point, right? And I'm not going to tell him what to do, but I'm going to say when he writes something like that a dime for every Israeli gave me a blank look. The callousness of that statement is beyond belief. In other words, what he's saying is that Israelis don't give a shit that we're oppressing the hell out of Palestinian people. Right. That's what he's saying. And is that a good look? I mean, no self-awareness at all, Avi. Come on.
Yeah.
I don't get how that becomes a clever response. It's sort of like if after George Floyd had been murdered, well, I know there were Republicans in Congress who got up and said, nobody cares about that at all. It's the same, basically, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just weird that he said that out loud. Again, if I had a dime for every Israeli who gave me a blank look when I referenced the Amnesty report this past week. But it's weird on two levels, because one level is like, if it's true and it's apartheid, he should care. The other thing, though, is if it's not true and they're accusing it of apartheid, he should care. Because why would you want your country to be accused? I mean, that's the lane that you go if you're trying to do PR. And that's what most people are doing. If you're trying to defend the indefensible and pretend that what Israel's doing is not apartheid, you should be up in arms because you allegedly care about this stuff and you'd fight apartheid. And that's not what exists here. So it's just a weirdly off-brand. To me, it just seems like a fuck you to Amnesty and to anyone who's taking it seriously. And he doesn't know how to respond.
And in the end, he does a grave disservice.
To the
Jewish people, right? Saying, we don't care. You're not going to make us care.
Right.
And
we don't care about human rights, basically. Yeah. And then he says, this tweet has infuriated many haters who are deeply frustrated that a century of hatred and rejectionism and 2 decades of BDS have left Israelis shrugging, enjoying their booming economy, and wondering which Arab country will be next to sign a peace agreement with them. Yeah. And then you wrote, I'm not infuriated at your bizarre tweet. I'm startled at the total lack of self-awareness you demonstrate and the callous disregard for Palestinian humanity you are celebrating. Which I don't think he responded to that, but
no, and I don't care if he does.
Right. But it's absurd, And the other thing that's uncomfortable for people is, and not that this should matter, but like you can only say that it's anti-Semitic to accuse Israel of apartheid so much when you have Jewish Israeli organizations saying it's apartheid, and I don't think that should matter. Like, because I think that. You shouldn't have to be Jewish to condemn to have your voice count in this, but it's just within their framing of how they frame it. Like it doesn't hold water unless all these organizations are just self-loathing Jews.
Right. And I guess you had on recently a friend of mine, Ariel Gold, said, I thought in a tweet, something really perfect about this charging amnesty and groups like that with anti-Semitism. There's real anti-Semitism. I mean, there are people getting killed. There are people being threatened. There are people really suffering from the crime of real anti-Semitism. Why cheapen it in this way? Why take the word totally out of its realm of real meaning and reduce it to this? Because at some point people become desensitized to it. It's like, oh yeah, there they go again, anti-Semitism. I guess it, whatever. And it loses its meaning, and they don't get it. I don't think they care at the end of the day that they don't get it. They think that their bullying will continue to work for them. I just think that I said years ago, I mean, my goal in this was to win friends. Their goal seems to be to pummel people to submission. I'd rather have friends than people who are afraid. Because look, this is something I used to, when the Pope would create cardinals behind the Iron Curtain during the Soviet era, he would name them in our heart, is the Latin term he'd use, in our heart, because he wouldn't want to reveal their names because they would be persecuted.
Right.
I have a club of members of Congress in my heart. And they're the members of Congress who will say to me over the years, oh, Zogby, I'm really with you, but I can't do it publicly because you know what the Jews are like. And I'll say back to them, I'll say, there's an anti-Semite in this conversation, and it's not me. I mean, people have said horrible things to me. I call them anti-Semites for Israel, and they are large in number. They're large in number, but AIPAC seems to be happy. If we pummel them into submission and force them to say, we love you, doesn't matter that they don't love me. Doesn't matter that they don't, that they're doing it only because they're afraid. It's like a really bad marriage that they're willing to keep going with as long as the person is subdued and will vote the right way. That, I think, has it's a fragile relationship, but that's what they're going for here. And I think that with some members of Congress, they get away with it because they're frightened little boys and girls. But I think that the amnesty is the wrong guy to pick on in this crowd. They're not going to back off, and they are the gold standard in human rights. I mean, it's you can't write the State Department Human Rights Report annually without referring to Amnesty's work in China and Burma and whatever country in the world it is. 10 million members and people writing everywhere, and then all of a sudden say, well, this one doesn't count. It's gonna
they're off. Their judgment's off on this one. Yeah. Kate, you have any questions?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering what sources you would recommend that people follow, because obviously with all of this stuff, if you read the New York Times, you're going to get a very, very specific viewpoint. And for people who are interested in learning more, what would you recommend checking out?
Well, I just have a book that I wrote called Arab Voices. And in the back of Arab Voices, which you can buy, it's online, there's a former college professor, right? I do here are books and articles you can read. And I'd say Arab Voice, I mean, actually, because it's based on my polling for decades in the region, I actually do recommend it to people about understanding Saudi Arabia and about understanding Iraq and about understanding Lebanon and Palestine and all these countries. But I also think that there are, in every country in the region, there's an English language paper that is online that is great. The Jordan Times is wonderful. Al-Ahram Weekly, not the daily, but weekly, and it's really good. There's a paper called the Arab Weekly. It's really good. I also think that Haaretz has an English version. It's an Israeli paper. Some of the hardest hitting reporting, not just on Israel-Palestine, but also on the broader region, comes from Haaretz, and I recommend that. And I also, there's a publication here in America called Al Monitor, ALMONITOR. They have some of the finest reporting from everything from Iran and Turkey, across the Middle East, from Russians, and from from Americans. Some of the really fine reporters that I've known in all these countries have gone to El Monitor to do their work. It's like a one-stop shop for really, really good reporting. And all these sources are largely free. And so that's kind of where I'd go. You start by buying my book, Arab Voices, and then you do all of these other publications. But yeah, Kate, that's that. And look, if anybody wants to, Amnesty's report is online. I think before people make a judgment about it, read it. I mean, it's really, really thorough, and very good. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zogby.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm still people should. I'm sorry. It's in the blood, I guess, right?
No, you never stop being a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't make house calls.
And B'Tselem on Twitter also. Someone just suggested in the comments. B'Tselem is great. The human rights organization, the Israeli human rights organization that, said before it was cool, said that there was apartheid. So,
Oh, and and I think people could take a look at Mondo Weiss. Good stuff.
Yeah, Mondo Weiss is great. Yeah.
Yeah. There's lots of great stuff. I mean, and I'm only saying Arab Voices, my book, because I've got an appendix in the back that just goes country by country to the stuff you can read for each one. But I think that there's like I said, a lot of English language papers, newspapers, and it's really worth looking at them. El Monitor is great, and Haaretz is fantastic for Israel Palestine news.
I'm just reading the book 10 Myths About Israel by Ilan Pappé, which is great. Yeah. So I'm going to try to have him on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
much, Katie.
Yes. Kate has to fix her camera, but thank you so much. Come back soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
If you were watching this now and you want to hear the rest of our really interesting chat, because if you watch this live, you got to see the whole thing, which is great. But if you're tuning in later and you want to hear the chat that I have with Kate Willett and Leslie Lee about Joe Rogan and Spotify and misinformation, disinformation, you can do that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Don't forget patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Leslie Lee. Thank you, Kate Willett. And if you're see you all over at Call-In. Bye, everyone. Did I forget anything, Brad? All right. Cool.